A lone street corner trembles under half-lit neon signs, their flickers casting uneasy shapes across the wet pavement. This should have been a simple morning, a $500 gig that promised a new line on her resume, but beneath the hum of distant traffic and the faint smell of rain-soaked concrete, an unsettling hush settles in. It's as if the city itself is too afraid to speak, holding its secrets behind drawn curtains and locked doors, leaving only a ghost of her presence lingering in the stubborn glow of a street lamp. Her vanished footsteps stretch through alleys and empty lots, carried away by uncertain winds. A life once filled with dreams of runways and magazine covers now sits reduced to a fading photograph on a damp flyer. Your heart tightens as you imagine the final moments leading to her disappearance, the false sense of security in a stranger's promise. With no answers in sight, all that remains is this uneasy calm, and the nagging suspicion that behind one of these darkened panes, someone is smiling in the silence, knowing exactly what happened, yet offering no hint at all. Welcome to CrimeByte, your gateway into the shadows where truth and secrets collide. Here, every unsolved case is an unanswered question, every missing person a haunting presence that demands our attention. We peel back layers of carefully constructed lies and shine a relentless light on stories others choose to forget. Our mission isn't to provide comfort, but to seek understanding, no matter how unsettling. Today, we invite you to follow us into the unknown, where each new revelation brings us closer to the truth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notifications button for more. She was not yet a household name or a prominent face on glossy magazine covers, but ask anyone who knew her, and they would tell you that she had the spark. Her friends described her as genuine, with a slow-burning ambition that propelled her forward in a competitive world. In photographs, she always seemed on the verge of something, a hint of stardom glowing in her eyes, the promise of a future shaped by bold aspirations. Modeling had not been a childhood fantasy. It was an evolving dream that took root as she discovered how much she loved the camera's attention. And though she was just one among countless hopefuls striving for a big break, there was a quiet belief, shared by those around her, that she would stand out. In the small apartment she shared with a roommate, her corner of the living space told a story. Old magazines lay open to fashion spreads she admired, their edges marked with sticky notes. She kept a binder of printed headshots and a USB stick filled with digital images from past shoots. A folder on her laptop bristled with bookmarked websites, modeling forums, agency listings, freelance photographers' portfolios. No single gig had catapulted her into success yet, but each job, no matter how small, felt like progress. She was getting better at her craft, learning the language of angles and light, teaching herself to relax before the lens. When friends asked how she managed to stay optimistic, she'd shrug and say something simple like, "I know it'll happen for me eventually." She wasn't waiting for miracles. She was forging her own path, trusting that if she put herself out there, opportunity would knock. Her family supported her quietly, proud of her determination, though occasionally anxious about the unpredictability of freelance gigs. Money was tight. These small shoots often paid little to nothing, and she supplemented her income with a part-time job waiting tables or working a register. Each month she hoped to land just one better-paying gig, something to fund a new set of professional headshots or pay for a workshop on runway techniques. We can never know precisely what thoughts crossed her mind that morning. Did she reassure herself that this was just another stepping stone, one more booking that would lead her to the next level? If there were doubts, perhaps she reasoned that no great opportunity comes without risk. She wasn't foolish. She'd read warnings online about suspicious gigs, but maybe this one seemed too straightforward to be a threat. $500 just for a few hours of posing. What kind of harm could come from that? In a city full of unnamed faces and transient dreams, she stood poised at the threshold of who she might become. Friends who spoke to her in the days before she vanished remember her smile, the light in her eyes when she mentioned the upcoming shoot. It was the kind of excitement that suggested her long-awaited break might be near, and at last she could gain a foothold in the world that dazzled her imagination. Yet as we know now, that morning would not bring the promises she hoped for. Instead, it would mark the beginning of a terrifying enigma, Bright dreams now cast long, dark shadows. The life that once glowed with possibility would become a chilling, cautionary tale. And as we look back, we wonder, did she sense something amiss? Or did her faith in a future she was still constructing lead her unwittingly into the jaws of despair? On the morning she disappeared, the city stirred with its usual rhythms. Commuters hustled to trains, shopkeepers rolled up their shutters, and joggers cut through quiet parks. Hers was just another figure heading out with purpose, except that she never returned. To understand what happened, investigators would later reconstruct her final known movements, following a trail that began in her apartment building's lobby and ended in a void of uncertainty. Early surveillance images show her dressed casually, a bag slung over one shoulder. She pauses at the corner, perhaps checking a message on her phone or adjusting her scarf against the chilly air. Then she continues onward. Another camera catches her passing a boutique's window display. She glances briefly at a pair of boots, then moves on. These snippets feel almost painfully mundane now, normal actions that carry a crushing significance in hindsight. As time crawls on, no camera catches her again. At some point along that route, she vanished. Investigators would revisit these locations repeatedly, questioning shopkeepers, drivers, passers-by. Some vaguely recall seeing a woman that might have been her, but nothing definitive emerges. The digital breadcrumbs, a phone ping here, a background glimpse on a traffic camera, don't reveal what happened next. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through her social circle. Friends tried calling her phone that afternoon, no answer. By evening, worry set in. A roommate called her parents. They reached out to acquaintances, posted urgent messages on social media. Meanwhile, the city went about its business, unaware that a life had slipped through invisible cracks. The investigation would later reveal a critical gap. The last instructions she received for the shoot were vague. The promised location hadn't been nailed down publicly. The person who contacted her might have changed meeting places last minute. Perhaps they picked a spot with no cameras, carefully orchestrated to avoid leaving a trail. Every speculation only deepened the mystery, but she didn't reappear. And as hope faded, the nature of speculation darkened. Had someone been waiting for her? Did a vehicle pull up just out of frame? Did she trust a stranger who led her down a quiet side street? The unanswered questions clung to the air, thickening with each new dead end. We replay those final steps over and over, studying the grainy footage like a sacred text. Each second that passes without finding her is a second that gnaws at the hearts of those who knew and loved her. The day it all changed seemed so ordinary at the time. Now it stands as a defining pivot, where reality bent into something incomprehensible. The city's silence deepened, and an invisible line was crossed. There would be no easy solutions here, only darker and more unsettling revelations. What kind of deal convinces a rising talent to meet a stranger early in the morning with minimal hesitation? She'd seen offers before, some legitimate, some not. This one, however, seemed straightforward. A quick shoot for $500 in cash. That's more than a token fee. It could cover a month's rent in a modest room or fund an entire round of professional headshots. It's the kind of payday that might quiet doubts and tilt the scales in favor of trust. Digging deeper, investigators discovered that the contact details provided were vague. An email from a free account, a phone number with no verified name, no social media presence for the supposed photographer or agent. At first glance, it might look like a new freelancer eager to build a portfolio. But hindsight paints a darker picture. Someone went to lengths to hide their identity, leaving just enough bait to lure her out. Friends recall her mentioning the gig with guarded excitement. Finally, something easy, she might have said. Not a big deal, just a quick shoot. It's likely she planned to be back by lunchtime, eager to share details with her roommate. None of them suspected a trap. After all, shady offers usually come with obvious warning signs. This one seemed almost too normal to be sinister. We often imagine criminals as sloppy, leaving telltale clues. But whoever crafted this opportunity knew how to keep things minimal. They did not provide a fixed studio address, just a general area. They avoided naming agencies or providing a website link that could be checked. Every attempt to verify leads came up empty. It was as if a phantom had offered her a golden ticket and then vanished into digital smoke. In interviews, other models reported receiving similar messages but chose not to respond. One woman says she felt uneasy about the lack of details and never replied. Another admits she nearly took the offer, but got cold feet. Had the victim known others had doubts, would she have backed off too? Sadly, that knowledge came too late. The investigators tried to follow the digital trail. Burner phones registered under false names, emails routed through foreign servers, ads that vanished after being viewed once. It became clear that the perpetrator understood how to remain untraceable. For the authorities, this meant no easy breakthroughs, no obvious suspect. For the public, it struck fear. If such traps exist, who might be next? As we lean closer to these details, a terrifying realization emerges. This wasn't a random crime of impulse. Someone crafted a scenario that looked perfectly benign from the outside. They didn't just rely on luck. They orchestrated a situation to lure a trusting soul into a deadly silence. The victim believed she was heading to a simple shoot, an easy win in a challenging field. Instead, she stepped off a cliff into darkness. This mysterious offer left an unsettling question lingering in the minds of all who uncovered its secrets. If a single, cleverly written invitation can make a young talent vanish, how many more traps are out there, waiting patiently for their next unsuspecting prey? When a promising young life vanishes into thin air, suspicion scatters like broken glass, reflecting in 100 directions. The victim's disappearance prompted a thorough review of everyone connected to her world. From photographers she had worked with to acquaintances who drifted in and out of her orbit, no one was above scrutiny. One name that emerged was a photographer she had worked with a month prior. He ran a small studio known for headshots and fashion tests. He seemed professional, but when questioned, his story offered no insight. He claimed he had no knowledge of her new gig and provided verifiable appointments for that morning. Another candidate, a booking agent who once promised to connect her with clients but never delivered. He vanished shortly after she went missing, but records showed he'd moved for unrelated reasons. Then there were the shadowy figures, a mysterious online scout who contacted her months ago with vague offers. Another model recalled the victim mentioning a friend of a friend who had industry contacts. Yet no one seemed to recall details. Much of the modeling world operates in loose networks, word-of-mouth references, and casual introductions. This web of connections, so useful in building a career, now formed a tangle of half-clues and uncertain motives. Some leads pointed towards individuals with suspicious histories. A man arrested years prior for harassment of a young woman in a similar field. A photographer's assistant rumored to have made inappropriate advances on models. Police dug into their pasts, cross-referencing dates and locations. Yet every time they approached a breakthrough, the trail dissolved into uncertainty. No one could be definitively placed at the right spot at the right time to intercept her. The complexity grew when digital footprints offered nothing concrete. The email sender behind the $500 gig wore a digital mask. The burner phone used for texting her was purchased with cash and discarded. No fingerprints, no surveillance footage capturing a face. Suspicion hovered over multiple persons, but never landed long enough to stick. As the community reeled, theories proliferated. Some believed a serial predator haunted these streets, carefully selecting victims. Others insisted it must be someone from her closest circle, someone who knew her routines. Online forums buzzed with speculation, names thrown around, accusations made without evidence. This cacophony frustrated investigators, who needed facts, not rumors. The persons of interest changed from week to week as leads dried up or new hints emerged. One detective described it as chasing shadows in a hall of mirrors. Every reflection led to another, and none to the truth. Without a singular name to focus on, the case settled into a standoff between known facts and whispered secrets. The haunting question lingers. Among these many faces studied and discarded, was one the smiling mask of a killer. Is there a person out there savoring the chaos they created, knowing full well the authorities remain blind to their identity? Until they can isolate a single suspect from this crowd of possibilities, the investigators remain stuck, knowing that the real threat might still be at large, biding time for another unsuspecting soul. In the days after her disappearance, law enforcement mobilized with an urgency fueled by public concern. They brought in seasoned detectives, combed through her phone records, computer files, and any digital communication that could lead them closer to answers. Posters bearing her face spread through neighborhoods, while press conferences called for community assistance. They tried everything: public appeals for information, private interviews with known associates, revisiting every location along her last known route. Psychologists offered profiles of potential perpetrators, someone methodical, patient, skilled at blending in. Digital forensics experts attempted to recover deleted messages, but nothing emerged except routine job inquiries and friendly chats. Days turned into weeks, and the media's focus intensified. Reporters peppered the lead detective with tough questions at press conferences. The community wanted reassurance, a sign that progress was made. But how do you reassure when every promising lead crumbles under scrutiny? Rumors spread that the case might go cold. They re-examined the simplest details: the victim's schedule, the friends she texted that morning, the cafe where she grabbed coffee. They even considered unorthodox methods: checking security footage from delivery trucks, searching through social media posts from people who passed those streets that day. Some detectives began to wonder if they were dealing with a seasoned criminal who knew exactly how to erase all traces. Every step forward was met with silence. They found no ransom note, no cryptic message from the offender. If this was a kidnapping, where was the demand? If it was murder, where was the evidence? Without a hint of her location or condition, they struggled to categorize the crime. All they had was a vanished person in a predatory scenario that must have played out somewhere off camera. Some officers confided in one another after hours, sharing theories over stale coffee. Maybe she never showed up to the gig. Maybe she got cold feet and ran away. But her close friends insisted she would never vanish without word. She had no reason to disappear voluntarily. She was building a future, not escaping one. Eventually, the police faced a grim possibility: that the perpetrator was careful enough to outsmart them indefinitely. They checked similar cases in other regions, hoping for patterns. They interviewed known offenders with similar MOs. Nothing fit perfectly. Everything about this crime felt custom-tailored, a nightmare stitched together just for her. Yet, the authorities pressed on. They knew giving up was not an option. Even if the trail was invisible, they trusted that persistence or a future tip might crack it open. But as time wore on, their voices sounded less confident at press briefings. The case weighed on them, a growing burden of unrealized justice. The question that haunted them was simple: if the law, with all its tools and expertise, can't find a single thread to pull loose, what hope remains of unraveling this knot of silence? Beneath the poised exterior she presented to the world, flawless poses, radiant smiles, and confident strides, she carried insecurities and hidden burdens. Modeling might appear glamorous, but it's often an exhausting grind, a balancing act between confidence and self-doubt. Behind closed doors, she worried about rent, about competition, about the fading window of youth. Personal notes and journal entries, unearthed after her disappearance, revealed glimpses of her inner world. She wrote about auditions that led nowhere, casting directors who dismissed her too quickly, photographers who hinted at inappropriate favors. Though she maintained a hopeful front, frustration and worry bled through ink on paper. She wondered if she was doing enough, if caution and trust could coexist in a world where everyone claimed to be a professional. Friends recall subtle changes in her demeanor leading up to the shoot. She mentioned feeling stuck, wanting to break through to bigger opportunities. Maybe that's why she ignored the quiet voice at the back of her mind, whispering caution. Maybe she told herself, "This will finally get me noticed." She wanted to believe that a single job could tilt her career trajectory upward. Behind her ambition was the fear that success might never come. She had seen other hopefuls give up modeling to pursue more stable paths. She didn't want to become a cautionary tale of wasted potential. Ironically, it is her disappearance that transformed her into another kind of cautionary tale, one far more tragic than she ever imagined. Financial stress might also have dulled her alarm bells. $500 for a short assignment was significant. It could solve immediate problems, buy her time, fund better self-promotion. The darker truth is that predators know this. They understand how to exploit hope, how to frame traps as opportunities. Her vulnerabilities were not weaknesses of character, but reflections of the uphill climb she faced. In these private spaces and secret thoughts, we see her not as a faceless victim, but as a full human being, fears, aspirations, and complexities included. She was a dreamer, but not a fool. She took measured risks in a dangerous ecosystem, trusting that her instincts were good enough to keep her safe. But as we know, instincts can fail. And when they fail in a world as unforgiving as this, the cost can be unimaginable. Her struggles and secrets do not blame her for what happened. They remind us that anyone chasing a dream can be blindsided by cruelty. If we want to prevent such horrors, we must understand the pressures that push talented, hopeful individuals into the hands of those lurking in the shadows. While investigators chase shadows, her family lived through a nightmare no parent or sibling ever prepares for. Each day without news felt like a limb torn away, leaving raw wounds behind. They called her name into empty rooms, prayed in silence, and refused to accept that she might never walk through their front door again. Her parents spoke to the media, their eyes red from sleepless nights, voices trembling. They begged for leads, pleaded with whoever knew something to come forward. They organized community searches, handing out flyers, combing through nearby parks, abandoned lots, and alleys she might have passed that day. Each time they found nothing, the silence cut deeper. Siblings who once teased her about her modeling dreams now protected her memory fiercely. They described her silly habits, her favorite songs, the way she would burst into laughter over inside jokes. These memories sharpened the ache of her absence. How does one accept that a loved one stepped out one day and never returned? The community rallied behind them with food, donations, and kind words. But nothing could fill the void left by her vanishing. Every theory they heard, whether from law enforcement or concerned friends, opened new wounds. They wanted certainty, even if it was terrible. The limbo was suffocating. Her mother recalled their last phone call, just a casual chat about weekend plans. Her father remembered her laughter echoing down the hallway the last time she visited. That these mundane interactions could be the final memories weighed heavily. They clung to each word, each image, knowing that these scraps might be all they have left if she never reappears. In this tragedy, their love and sorrow become a testament to her humanity. She wasn't just a missing model. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend who left a hole that nothing can fill. Their desperate search for answers transcends the investigation. It is a raw, human response to losing someone without a goodbye. As time grinds on, the family faces a brutal truth. They might never know what truly happened. But they vow to never stop looking, never stop speaking her name. If keeping her memory alive can somehow break through the silence, then they will scream it into the void until the universe responds. As the investigation dragged on with no resolution, detectives broadened their scope. They looked at old cases, dusty files of missing persons who vanished under similarly vague pretenses. What they found unsettled them, patterns that suggested the victim was not the first, nor possibly the last. They discovered parallels in other regions. An aspiring actress last seen heading to a private audition, a dancer promised a portfolio shoot, a musician offered a quick, well-paid gig. All ended abruptly, leaving behind only questions. In each case, the perpetrators erased their footprints with chilling expertise. Online forums dedicated to missing persons buzzed with speculation. Families of other victims reached out to investigators, sharing eerily similar stories. Some had noticed the same vague language in emails, the same lack of confirmable references. A disturbing pattern began to crystallize. Someone, or multiple someones, preying on those who dared to reach for the spotlight. Advocacy groups stepped up, warning young hopefuls to verify every job offer, to never meet strangers alone, to demand credentials. The victim's face joined a chorus of vanished talents, each story echoing the same chilling theme: trust broken by a cunning ambush. This possibility weighed heavily on investigators and the public alike. Searching these parallel cases gave detectives a sense of urgency. If a pattern existed, it meant the responsible party might strike again. They had to piece together partial descriptions, rumored sightings, and inconsistent witness accounts to form a tenuous profile. Were these crimes planned by a single individual moving from city to city, or a decentralized group sharing methods and resources? This revelation fueled public outcry. Victims' families banded together, demanding a specialized task force. Media coverage grew sharper, pressing authorities to consider the larger picture. The victim's story became part of a disturbing mosaic, her face among many lost dreamers whose ambitions led them into unseen traps. But knowledge of a pattern offers no immediate relief. It simply raises the stakes. Now it's not just about her, it's about preventing more lives from being snuffed out. The pattern suggests these crimes won't stop on their own. They must be exposed, their architects unmasked. Still, the critical question remained. Could this newfound understanding help crack her case before it too joined a long list of unsolved disappearances? Or would the pattern only confirm what everyone feared, that justice might arrive too late, if at all? As the investigation reached a stalemate, the focus shifted repeatedly. Every detail once deemed irrelevant was revisited. The victim's digital presence, once scoured for clues, was re-examined. Her modeling contacts, previously questioned, were asked to recall even the smallest nuances. Rumors flared up. Maybe she ran off with someone willingly. Maybe she staged her disappearance. Friends and family vehemently rejected these ideas, yet with no evidence, wild speculation found fertile ground. Anonymous tips flooded in, sightings in distant towns, claims that someone heard a scream in an alleyway. Most proved dead ends. As days turned into weeks, the absence of progress gnawed at everyone. The police considered the possibility of human trafficking networks or a carefully orchestrated murder. They tried approaching the case from different angles. Psychological profiling of a potential culprit, geographic profiling of where victims vanished, checking if there's a seasonal or event-based pattern. Some detectives became convinced the answer lay hidden in someone's silence. Perhaps a witness afraid to come forward, or a friend who recalled an odd comment but never mentioned it. They issued renewed public pleas. If you know something, say something. The response was underwhelming. People were scared or felt their information too trivial. With no resolution in sight, the victim's story began to fade from headlines, replaced by fresher news cycles. The family's pleas continued, but with less media spotlight. The case risked becoming another unsolved mystery, relegated to internet true crime forums. Investigators fought against that outcome, determined not to let her vanish from their collective memory as thoroughly as she vanished from that street corner. This uncertainty took a psychological toll. Investigators felt defeated, the family hollowed, the community uneasy. Even if people weren't talking about it daily, a tension settled in the city's undercurrent. Who could trust strangers now? Every simple gig, every opportunity seemed fraught with hidden dangers. Without clarity, the case hovered in a state of painful limbo. The authorities tried to remain optimistic, but their voices sounded strained. They needed something, anything, to break the silence. And as each path ended in darkness, one chilling question remained. If all these threads lead nowhere, what does that say about the cunning of whoever orchestrated this disappearance? Years later, her name still circulates in certain circles, her face in missing person databases, her story repeated as a cautionary tale. New aspiring models mention her case when warning each other to be careful. The city remembers her, not as a solved mystery, but as an enduring wound that never healed. Social media groups dedicated to missing persons keep her photo pinned at the top. Occasionally, a new tip arrives. Someone thinks they spotted a resemblance in another city, or found an old message thread that might mean something. These sparks of hope flare and fade, leaving behind the same emptiness. Her family learned to live with uncertainty, a state of permanent grieving for a future that never came. They keep her room tidied, as if anticipating a sudden return. They hold on to her belongings, her photos, her dreams, reluctant to let go of the life she left suspended in midair. Investigators who once labored over her case have moved on to others. Some retired, carrying her story as an unresolved chapter in their careers. Others remain on the force, occasionally revisiting the file, hoping modern technology or a stroke of luck might solve what they couldn't. But official statements grow rarer. Official energies shift elsewhere. Meanwhile, the cautionary lessons learned from her disappearance remain relevant. Advocacy groups press harder for safety training. Young talents learn to demand references, to meet in public places, to trust their instincts. In a way, her loss shapes a new landscape where others become more vigilant, refusing to ignore warning signs that once seemed benign. In the end, we stand where we began, in uneasy silence. The neon-lit street corner that once displayed her missing flyer now hosts new posters for other missing souls. The city goes on, its secrets intact, its conscience still burdened. We look up, recalling her final steps, her final decision, and we realize that no matter how carefully we pick apart this story, some mysteries refuse to yield. The question that lingers, rattling inside our minds, is this: if after all these years and all this effort, no answers emerged, could it happen again, and would we be any more prepared to stop it? A lone street corner hums quietly beneath a half-faded neon sign, a place where, once upon a time, a missing person flyer clung desperately to a lamppost. It's strange how an entire life can vanish, leaving only questions and regrets drifting through the silence. In these final moments together, we acknowledge that this story may never have a perfect ending. But acknowledging that fact doesn't mean accepting defeat. It means recognizing the power we have now, to learn, to warn, to change how we approach uncertain opportunities in a complicated world. Her story does not end with the last unanswered question. Instead, it forges a path for others to follow with more caution. Share her name, share her fate, and share the lessons learned. Remind those chasing their dreams to verify credentials, insist on safer meeting conditions, and trust their instincts. Each retelling of her story is a whisper of warning against those who exploit ambition. Through these whispers, we can chip away at the darkness that allowed her to vanish without a trace. As a community, we can take action. Demand better verification methods in talent industries. Support organizations offering safety training and resources. Press for legislative changes that limit anonymous, suspicious job postings. The world can't be made perfect, but it can be made safer if we raise our voices together. Your involvement, however small, contributes to a landscape where fewer dreams end in silence. Now, as we close this chapter, consider staying with us, keeping watch, and remaining vigilant. CrimeByte exists to shine a light on stories like hers, to ensure they are not forgotten, and to encourage everyone to question the status quo. By engaging with this content, you join a community dedicated to truth and prevention. Don't let this warning fade into the background. Carry it forward, share it, keep it alive so that others may be spared her fate. Before you go, show your support for these stories and the mission they carry. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss a crucial update. By doing so, you help these voices echo longer and louder, ensuring that what happened to her stands as a solemn lesson and not just another lost memory.